Yeah, so the title is Optimizing User Acquisition for an App Portfolio. So I kind of start the presentation with just a few kind of um, data points around kind of you know trends in sort of distribution and marketing, and then I go into two examples that of kind of like projects that Rovio has undertaken and my team specifically has undertaken to sort of like optimize the way that we do cross promotion within our portfolio. So yeah, who am I? I wrote the book Freemium Economics. I'm the VP of User Acquisition at Rovio, and I run mobiledevmemo.com. So kind of kicking off the presentation, why build an app portfolio? So people are spending more time on their mobile devices, but they're actually downloading fewer apps. And just a couple of data points here. So this is share of US minutes spent on apps owned by major tech companies, and you see that you have a couple big companies that own a lot of mobile time, and then the kind of that major category leader there is kind of like the big games in the various verticals, right? So you have you basically have a situation where the sort of like app economy is matured to the point where you do have the sort of like winners have taken all, right? So these people own app time, and so if you think about, okay, well, I'm distributing my app, I'm trying to get users from my app, and maybe that's through marketing, or maybe that's through kind of just virality or word of mouth, you have to compete with these people. People's time is sort of already accounted for, and it's not so much about getting someone to download your app as it is getting them to find a use case that's so much more credible and compelling than one of these. So here's average number of apps used and time per person per month. And you see the time is increasing quarter to quarter, but actually the number of apps used is pretty stagnant and actually even decreasing. Here you see mobile use by category, and games is dropping. So I think that kind of mirrors what you see with a lot of other sort of kind of innovative marketplaces with tech. I mean, games kind of leads the use case, but other verticals sort of catch up, right? I mean, games is like a perennial form of entertainment and diversion, and that's the most obvious way to use new technology. I think VR is a good example of that. Certainly, the mobile app ecosystem is. And yeah, again, you just see gaming losing ground to other types of apps, right? So it's sort of gaming established itself as like the primary use case on the form factor, and then the other sort of verticals catch up, like other consumer tech verticals catch up. And here you have smart device penetration in Europe, and I include, and you see that it's high. So over 100% in some cases, meaning that people own multiple devices. And yeah, I include this here just to sort of make the point that you can't assume growth comes from increased adoption of the form factor, because everyone has a smartphone. Everyone that is going to get a smartphone has one. So you can't assume that there's some growth that's going to be inherent in just more people getting smartphones. And this is an old one. I couldn't find. So I know there's a new. So this is kind of one of my favorite data points, and I've been including this in presentations for like a year and a half. So this is like from 2014, but I read that I want to say Gartner just did another survey, and they came to the same conclusion that the majority of smartphone owners download 0 new apps per month, right? And I think the takeaway here is that I think it's people like to kind of propagate this idea that a lot of app installs are from organic search, just because that's like a comfortable notion, right? That it's comforting to think that I could release an app and not spend any money and somehow get all these installs. And I just don't think that's true. This kind of proves that. This kind of proves that the demand for apps is almost non-existent. You have to create the demand via advertising. So as a result of all those data points, it's getting more expensive to advertise new apps to new people. I mean, this is probably familiar to everybody in the room. And so this trend, I would not expect that to abate. And because mobile gaming is hit-driven, having a game for players now to cross-promote into a hit later is a form of hedging, right? So if you think about, okay, well, I'm working on a game, it's going to be a hit, but it's going to take 2 years to get to market. and I expect CPI prices to go up in that time. If I can acquire users now and sort of bank them into my app, you can think about that as a form of hedging against the increase of the price, right? Assuming then you'd cross-promote those same users into the hit game when you release it. And so this is kind of something I've been thinking about for a long time. So there's these two kind of states in commodities futures contracts trading. One is backwardation, which is kind of like the normal state of a commodities future market, where the future price today is lower than it would be the spot price in the future. And then there's contango. So that's backwardation. There's contango, where actually the futures price is higher now than I expect it to be, than I expect the spot price to be at a certain time in the future. But I'm willing to pay that premium for any number of reasons, right? So maybe I need to hedge the sort of like price fluctuation risk, or there's like cost of carrying, or there's benefits to carrying the commodity to fruition. So I think you have both of these states existing in the sort of market for ad impressions, right? Because the value of that ad impression is very much dependent on your app. So I might get more value from purchasing an ad impression than you would. And so for me, this sort of market is in backwardation. I can wait, or I could buy it now and utilize it to a better extent than you can. Or I might be in a situation where I need to keep the users in now, because I know very much that even though the price of those users will decrease in the future, if I have them in my app's portfolio now, the size of my launch is so big that even buying them on, like, the spot price might be lower in the future than the futures contract now, but I can still make better use of it in the future by having them and being able to deploy them in one sort of burst. I think that probably didn't make a lot of sense, so I'm going to move on. So given an increasingly competitive market for advertising impressions, it makes sense to draw heavily on cross-promotion for new launches. And that's kind of the point I was making. If I have a huge amount of users, I might be willing to pay more for them than a restricted amount of users. And on any given point in time, even if I can buy users at a cheaper level, I can't get enough of them to launch a huge game. But if I have them in my portfolio, then they're available to me. So here's some examples of that, right? So, and I don't necessarily think that these were. I don't think there was like a long-term strategy behind this sort of progression that you see here for these companies, but it worked out that way, right? So if you think about Boom Beach as holding the Clash users before they churned out of the Supercell ecosystem and being available to deploy in a Clash Royale, which will probably monetize better than Boom Beach, you could see that might have been like a premeditated strategy. So there's this hedging benefit, so you kind of get a mix. So if I don't know what CPI prices are going to be in the future, I know that they fluctuate. I can say, look, I want to hedge against the cost of this launch or the cost of acquiring users. So I'm going to buy some now, keep them in my portfolio, and then buy a bunch on the spot market or in real time in the future when I launch. And building a multi-game user lifecycle increases overall network LTV. So that is to say that if I have 2 games and a user could potentially play the second game after they play the first, if I'm thinking about acquiring that user, they probably have a higher LTV than if I have just a 1 game and they're going to churn out of my ecosystem after they finish playing that game. And then this is, so I think there's this kind of adverse selection that goes on a lot of times in the sort of market for ad impressions. So if you think about these really big, rich, smart developers, they're probably not selling you their good users, right? I mean, they probably know very well which users are going to spend money in their apps and which aren't, and so they're probably not willing to sell you the ability to advertise to their best users, right? So what they're doing is they're serving up their worst users, and you're buying those, right? So there's an element of that, and I think that'll probably get, that'll sort of pick up steam, I think, in the coming years when you see that, all of those things I talked about before are true with respect to like users downloading new apps and not using more apps. They're comfortable with their sort of the apps they have on their phone. They're not actively looking for new apps. Plus, I think brand money will sort of edge out a lot of the smaller players from like buying advertising. So I mean, maybe in the future, like all of the biggest developers say, you know what, I make so much money from IAPs and from like a robust app economy. I don't really even need to sell users to gaming companies, I can make that money on selling brand ads and just forego it altogether because my best players are worth so much. So why build an app portfolio? It allows you to smooth out revenues. So if you kind of consider like a game's life cycle from launch to like steady state or sunset state, probably looks like this in terms of revenue. So you get this kind of big spike as you're optimizing the game, and it's still fresh and it's benefiting from virality, and then the sort of revenues decline, right? But if you have multiple games, then you can kind of keep the sort of like general revenue level more stable. And this is from a post I wrote a while back, so there's a link there. And also just portfolio theory. So I mean, being able to diversify your revenue base and kind of protect against shifts in the market in terms of trends and stuff. So I mean, having a puzzle game plus a build-in battler plus all this other stuff, it might help you, keep your revenue stable if for some reason puzzle games get totally saturated and no one wants to play them anymore. And yeah, it's like a big topic, but I wrote an article here you can read if you're so inclined. So how do you do it? 1, release more than one game, and 2, be strategic about cross-promotion. So the rest of the presentation, I'll go through 2 examples from the user acquisition team at Rovio, things that we've done to sort of optimize our cross-promotion efforts and maintain people within our portfolio and just kind of like general strategic thinking around keeping people in the Rovio universe as opposed to being very strict about the way we think about users being in a specific game. So there have been two kind of big projects that we undertook. The first is optimize programmatic ad serving, and the second is a rich content ad portal. So optimize programmatic ad serving. So the idea behind this is just we shouldn't just blindly show ads to users. We shouldn't just blindly fill ad impressions. We should show the right ad to the right user at the right time, right? So we should show a user the ad that they're most likely to click on. So we built a Bayesian optimizer that serves ads based on performance aggregated around a number of dimensions. So the origin game, so the game the user's playing, the country the player's in, the player's device type, and then the player portfolio that we've built internally using behavioral data, right? So what this means is these are all the kind of filters that we use to figure out what the best ad to serve this person is. So we say, okay, we've got a user playing Angry Birds Epic, and they're in the US, and they're on an iPhone, and we've sort of profiled them as being like a heavy spender. What ad could we show them to produce the most benefit to our portfolio? And the kind of, just to sort of like flowcharty diagram here. So you've got the game serving the ad impression, so that the ad impression comes up, the game pings the ad server and says, hey, I've got this person playing Angry Birds Epic on an iPhone in the US with a heavy spender profile. What's the best ad to serve this person that they're most likely to sort of convert on? So click through and then retain within that game. So then the ad server figures out what ad that is based on the historical click-through rates and conversion rates and retention rates for that specific combination of filters. It sends the ad to the game. The game shows the ad. A user clicks it or not. If they do click it, then they retain or not and spend money or not. And once all that data, once the stuff that we optimize around, which is that retention, is knowable, then the game pings the ad server again, and the ad server updates its prior. So it updates its historical record of probabilities for retaining when shown that ad, right? And so it's sort of like constantly optimizes itself and adjusts what is shown as it gets more data. So actually, I wrote an article about this like 2 years ago, and it's what I did was I just went to our kind of internal services team and just showed them the pseudocode that I have in this article and said we should build this. So that's available at the URL, but it's not like anything super proprietary there. So how did that work? So for some games we actually doubled the outbound installs, right? So we doubled the amount of installs that we're sending to other games from that game. And it also significantly reduced the manual effort that was required to traffic ads, right? So instead of people, digging around in Excel, trying to figure out which campaigns we should be showing in which games, which is not as efficient as doing it algorithmically anyway, they don't have to do that at all anymore because the algorithm picks the ad impression in the ad. So the second thing, the rich content ad portal. So before, the goal was to show the right ad to the right person at the right time. The goal of this is just to show better ads overall, to create ad units that are just better, right? That are more valuable from the user's perspective and more valuable from our perspective in terms of conveying what the game is about. So we wanted to give players the ability to opt into ads, so not just shoving them down their throat, but actually creating like a pull scenario. And the idea behind that is, okay, if we actually do make rich content ads, they should be kind of entertaining and fun, right? So the user might actually want to watch them. We wanted to make ad placements feel like native content. So again, that goes into the idea of people thinking they're being entertained as opposed to advertised to. And we wanted to allow for rich content ad types. So, above and beyond just a sort of static banner, right? So, but like video. And so this is what came of that. This is live right now in Angry Birds Friends on Android. So it'll probably launch across our entire portfolio soon. So what you have here is this is kind of integrated into the sort of player hub in the game, but it's a button that you can open from the start screen, right? So what this does is it's a portal, and on the left you have your inbox, so that's obviously game related. That's actual game content. The next tab is like game-related content for Angry Birds Friends, right? So like if the PM or whatever, if there's like an event coming up in the next week, the PM could write some content and put it in that stream, and the user can go there every day and find out new information about about the game that they're playing, right? And then the next tab is games, so that's Rovio-wide, our whole portfolio. It's like news related to all the games in our portfolio. The next tab is Angry Birds, so that's just consumer product stuff, and then the last tab is the Toons TV channel, which is Rovio's like cartoon channel. And so what you have here is these are ad units, so that it could be static image like that, or that could be video, which opens up in YouTube. No, it opens up in a video player, sorry, and then text to go along with it. This could be long form text, so it could go, you could scroll up and down to read more of it, and then you see the sort of carousel indicator at the bottom. So these are swipeable left to right, right? So here this is like a feed, right? So you swipe it left to right to see more content, and so what that is swipeable ad unit, right? So that's a carousel ad unit essentially, but we're sort of trying to use it in a way that feels more native. So what were the results? So I initially had the actual percentages in here, but I took them out because I thought my boss would get upset, but he's not here, so I can just tell you. So we had, if I remember them now, I want to say we had a 70% increase in cross-promo impressions. So again, going back, there was a carousel ad unit, right? So you could scroll through. So before we implemented this, we just had a static banner that came up, and it was just the one banner, right? So now when this comes up, you've got potentially however many ads you can swipe through, right? So so what that did is it increased the number of ads we're showing in the same basic unit, because you might get some players that still open it up and they see one ad and they close it, but you might get some that are really actually interested in this content, so they open it up and they swipe a bunch of times and they see 10 ads in that same ad kind of console. So we had a 50% increase in cross-promo downloads. So 50% more downloads outbound from this than the previous unit, which again was just the standard static banner. And we had a 150% increase in App Store conversion rate. So that means 150% increase in basically click to download. So the people that went to the store page and then clicked download, we had a 150% increase in that. And I think the reasoning is, it's pretty obvious, right? We're putting more context around the ad, so people get more information in the ad that they see than they used to with the static banner, right? Especially with the video. If you see the video of the game in that placement, then you know exactly what the game's about. So you're probably much more, if you do click through, you're probably much more likely to actually then download the game from the App Store page, because you're not learning anything new in the App Store page. And then we had a moderate decrease in average CTR. I don't remember what that was, but it was expected, right? Because we're showing more ads now. That's it. That's the whole presentation.